The Code to Cash podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to the Code to Cash podcast. Today we have Greg Larsen, our podcast guest on Code to Cash, and he's going to talk to us about everything around pricing strategy as well as pricing and monetization systems, given his deep experience as a revenue operations leader. So welcome, Greg. Sorry for the faux pas in the beginning there.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for making time. I would love to kick us off with just having to learn a little bit more about you and how you actually, you have a long experience in leading revenue operations teams. I'm curious how you got into this career-wise.
Yeah. So for me, I kind of backed my way into revenue operations. I guess you could say that. So I started out in sales, and for 10 years, I was a sales rep, frontline sales rep, and sales leader over sales teams, and really cut my teeth at companies like Qualtrics and some other B2B SaaS companies that have grown on and had very successful exits. And so I got to see firsthand the pros of being on the sales side and the negotiation and everything that you deal with there. But I also got to see all of the stuff that was broken. And my mind is operational. And as I was in these sales orgs and seeing all the success they were having while combating process issues, systems issues, it led me in a startup that I was at after Qualtrics, where we were pretty lean. I just naturally tended to float to the strategy side and the optimization side. And so when I had the opportunity to become a leader over, revenue strategy instead of actual sales leadership, I took it, and my career just kind of shifted that way. And it's been a fun ride ever since. And so I like it because I have a unique background of being on the sales team and the sales side and understanding how their mind works and how the problems they're facing, and then being on the operational side. And so when I build things with the sales team and the sales guys in mind. So not a bunch of checkbox. You get into some systems that are built by IT or built by a very operational centered person, and they become a little bit heavy. A lot of tasks, a lot of things. I tend to build more of a sales style of operational system, and so I think it gives me a little bit of a unique position. But love the background, the experience that I've been able to have over the last 10, 15 years in the SaaS industry, and it's been a fun ride.
Interesting. It's not that common of a career switch from sales rep to RevOps. This is one of the rarer career switches I've seen, which does happen. I've seen it to other functions. So it's interesting that you made the switch from seller to RevOps. I'm curious about, even before we go more into the topics around monetization, I'm just curious about how do you build for a seller? Like, what are the principles, and what do you see folks who don't have your background, what do you see them get wrong about building for sellers?
Yeah. For me, the whole purpose of a revenue operations function and team and system is to enable the people that it supports. So my mantra, the way that I approach everything in revenue operations is people over process. And if I can't define how I'm helping the people that I work with any given initiative or system, then I have to go back to the drawing board. Don't create process for process's sake. It's got to have something, that's going to help a person do their job or be more successful. And that, if you can define it that way, then you're in the people business and you're using process to help them. And so what that looks like from a sales, everything that I do, everything that my team does should remove red tape or should actually make someone's process or someone's life easier. Automation, AI, those type of things, not 17 other fields in Salesforce to check boxes to make sure you're doing it correctly or to get a better report. That's my job. Like put that in the background, make sure that that's happening. The sales rep should be freed by my role, and not to say that I'm the only one that can do that. You know, that someone from an operational background can easily do that.
Yeah.
But having walked a few more than 1 mile in sales reps' shoes,
Yeah.
you know, hey, I'm going to build this, and it's just not going to be as helpful as I think it is, and it's going to cause a lot of pain for the people that have to go and do it.
Yeah.
That's the red flag. And so when we see that, we try to remove it and avoid it, and really just remove red tape from a sales rep's life, remove red tape from an executive's life in reporting structure and things like that. That's my philosophy, just that people over process, and really building your RevOps culture around that.
I really resonate with that, and often I find a lot of these systems or processes are built very top down, more from a compliance angle, and then that has the opposite effect of people actually not using the product. I'm curious, in your experience, either as a rep or as a RevOps leader, is there a type of system or a story that you know, something that you use which just didn't work for you? Would love to share some war stories here on the podcast.
Yeah. So, you know, being a B2B SaaS company, very experienced with Salesforce. And it was interesting. Early on in my career as a sales rep, I hated Salesforce because it was just a database, checkbox, do this, you know, and I never really felt like I got any value out of it.
Yeah.
And in my first sales endeavor at Qualtrics, the first B2B SaaS, a couple companies before that, but I finally had someone on the operational side show me how to use Salesforce. Not like, hey, how to digest the stuff they were creating for me, but actually how to go in and build and tailor my process around what I could benefit from. And all of a sudden, now that I owned it, you know, it wasn't just some system that the operations team handed to me, or that my boss said, hey, you got to click this task and do this. And all of a sudden, once I owned it, once I knew, oh, this is how it works, and this is what I can do with it, and this is how I can stay organized with it, it was just a gold mine of my process. My operational mind just clicked in, and I was like, oh, I'm completely organized now. And I went for it. And so I took that at Qualtrics, and now when I go to a new company, that's how we make it work. And the best Salesforce system, the best built operational system, if your users, the sales team, the CSMs, whoever's using it, if they don't know how to do it themselves, if they don't know how to make this little customization or to change this, change that to fit their need, they won't use it. Because I'm not working with kids straight out of college that, you know, whatever I say is gold. I've got 25-year veteran sales reps that they're like, hey, I've been doing this and I'm making $1 million a year, and I've never had to do that before. So I'm just gonna keep doing it.
Yeah.
And so that experience at Qualtrics helped me understand that that's okay. But if I spend some time to really massage and work Salesforce with an individual rep, not the entire sales team, that I can still have that aha moment with each rep of, hey, don't worry about all this other stuff that I did on that group training. This is the way you're going to use Salesforce.
Interesting.
And once a rep has that, that's where my philosophy, great reps will be great reps with a pad and pencil, with a super automated Salesforce system, with whatever they have. A great rep will always be great.
Yeah.
A good rep with a great Salesforce process will become great without getting any better at sales. So those are like your target of, hey, you're going to have some guys that you don't even need to worry about.
Yeah.
You're going to have some that you can really impact their life.
Interesting.
If you take the time to show them that. So
interesting. Yeah. So it's, you know, from a product development standpoint also, it's sort of interesting that you're not really building for the, you know, the super or power user, because they're already set. And maybe you can't add much value there, but there may be a large chunk of folks who can benefit, who may just have a negative perception from other experiences before. So we'll definitely, I want to circle back on the concept of systems, but I want to now touch on a few different topics domain wise. And as you know, the name of our podcast is Code to Cash. We're interested in monetization and monetization systems. So I'm curious about what makes you excited about the topic of pricing and monetization, and if there are any instances where this, for you, the aha moment went off that, okay, this lever helps, this lever can help a company make more money.
Yeah. So yeah, quote to cash monetization. I live in that world every day, trying to figure out how can we gain just that slightest advantage over the competition. When I really realized this, we do a lot of win-loss analysis. I've built systems, trying to just understand why we win, why we lose, and capture that information. I just did a presentation the other day on win-loss analysis and how important it is. And what I found over the years is no matter what you do, price and pricing model and everything always comes up in win-loss analysis. Whether it's true, whether it's a perception of what that price was, how the sales rep delivered it, there's variations to that. But if you can, especially in this economy right now, the last couple of years, if you can nail pricing model and pricing delivery, then you win 90% of the executive room. And the only way you really lose that deal is if you don't come to the table with a product that they believe can actually deliver. Because if you have a product that the executive team, your buying team believes will work, and you can sell them on the pricing story, that journey, you win. You
Interesting.
win. And so it's really a passion of mine to be able to identify what that is. And
Interesting.
you see it everywhere right now. I'm going to go outside of the SaaS world. Major League Baseball. If I'm traveling right now, if not, you'd see an entire background of baseballs and logos for Major League Baseball teams. I'm a huge baseball guy, and Shohei Ohtani just signed the largest sports contract in the history of U.S. sports, $700 million over 70 years. And everyone instantly goes into this, oh, the Dodgers over, like that is so much money. And then you get into the contract, and $680 million of that is deferred for 10 years. He gets a tax benefit because he doesn't have to pay taxes on it because he can move out of California at that point. Better tax rate. The Dodgers get to take $30 million off of their payroll tax every year. So not to get too deep, but they were so creative in that model that hasn't been done. They found what would resonate with the player. Hey, you're getting paid a lot of money over a lot of years. They found what would work best for them from a liability standpoint so that they can still produce a good product. And then they beat everyone to the punch with it. There were other teams that had the same model, right? And so applying that to B2B SaaS quote to cash is don't just go with, hey, here's your annual pricing, here's this, and this is what we're going to do. And if you need something different, let's discount it down. Or hey, we're going to throw a free product at you. The cool thing about that baseball example is it was actually Shohei Ohtani's idea. It wasn't just the Dodgers. And the Dodgers were willing to listen, and they said, wow, this actually benefits us too. And we can put a better product on the field. So as we're approaching that quote to cash and the pricing strategy, the model with SaaS companies, be creative, be willing to listen to them. What will work? Have a pricing model that's flexible enough that as long as it makes business sense, hey, maybe we can deviate a little bit for these bigger deals and some of these creative deals. Hey, the question that we like to tell our sales reps, and I tell at every company, is if you've built the rapport with someone and you go to the table early enough to get the deal done, not like, hey, we're sitting at December 13th and, we need to get this deal done by Christmas. What is it going to take? I mean, it's going to take an act of God, right? It's going to take a miracle. But if you come at them early enough and say, what makes sense to you?
Yeah.
And you're willing to create that partnership, you're likely going to get that deal done.
Yeah.
And it's going to be beneficial for both parties, because as a customer, I want the best deal.
Yeah.
But I don't want to watch my words. I don't want to mess you up
Yeah.
from a business standpoint to get that best deal. I want a partnership. And so if you have that trust back and forth. So from a strategy standpoint, that is gold, to create that partnership and get very creative.
This gets my gears churning in my head. So what is an example in a SaaS? What is a corollary of the baseball example to a SaaS contract, right? Your standard, your software license fees. This is what people do, right? They discount. Maybe they'll get some free seats here or there.
Right.
Maybe there's a ramp or something. So I'm curious, like what else have you seen out there?
So I'll take an example from a previous company. And before I was at Eltropy, we're a fintech. I worked in the translation software industry. Super, super exciting, right? It just sits in the background and translates your website, things like that. The company that I was at, we're struggling to scale our SaaS business in accordance with our services business. So we would get paid for every single word that was translated. It's a very scalable cost, but it's not recurring. Like 1 year, someone could do 1 billion words, and the next year, hey, we're done 0 words. But how do we scale the SaaS offering instead of just $25 annual or $25,000 annual to scale up with the usage? And we tried some models of, hey, incremental packages, your 25,000 package, your 45,000 package, a 75,000 package, based on like buckets of words. And it was hard to swallow, because big corporations, hey, we do 2 billion words a year. You can charge us $400,000 for the software up front. So that's a big one to take on. So what we came up with is we actually started to price it out, and we found a per word cost that we would be comfortable with based on those volumes. It came out to these bigger deals, half a penny per word. And so now, instead of saying, hey, it's 75 cents a word, it's never that, right? 25 cents a word plus $50,000 up front, we're saying it's 25.5 cents a word, unlimited, go for it. And for us, it was very scary, because all of a sudden we could not predict revenue. And that's totally backwards for a financial model. We went from having recurring revenue chunks, and we know, hey, this is contracted renewal, to we can't predict the volume, but we're going to get a half a penny for every single word that's produced. We knew how much overall volume we did, but it was super scary as an executive team to actually put that in place and move forward with it. But the sales conversations, oh my gosh, as a sales rep, you're going in, you no longer have to sell a 6-figure recurring revenue, weighted contract. It's, hey, do what you need, half a penny. If you do a lot, it's a quarter of a penny. If you don't do a ton, it's a full penny. But here's your price, 25.5 cents a word. And all of the sudden, at the end of the first year, we knew that it completely blew up, because we tripled our technology revenue. And we didn't sell a single recurring contract. It was tacked onto it. The price was so minuscule because the volumes were so high. All of a sudden, investment companies were like, okay, we're okay if you can't predict it in every contract, because overall we had 10 years of experience showing, hey, this is how much volume we're doing every single year, and it just continues to grow. So that would be an example of really bucking the norm of pricing strategy. We tested that for 6 months on a lot of different companies to make sure, but we were still nervous. We didn't just up and, caution to the wind and change our pricing model, which is not recommended. But we changed it. We heard the customer of, hey, this overhead is too high. Let's scale it as we go. And we had huge dividends. We ended up being acquired within 2 years of that, because our financial model just blew up.
Interesting.
And it was a really cool case study of listening to the customer,
Yeah.
really going out on a limb, changing pricing. And once we realized it worked with, a handful of case studies over 6 months, we just went and boom, it was actually
Interesting.
really fun to experience.
Interesting. So in this case, seems like the sort of recurring fees caused more friction in the sales process, and even the customer couldn't predict. But this reduced the burden from their end
Right.
of trying to think about how much it would be, and they were fine with the per unit cost. It's
Yep.
interesting because in this case it's such a big success, and then there are other cases, other industries where we've tried to do the exact same thing, and the customer says, "Hey, we can't do the math. I
Yep.
know how to pay per user. I'm just going to pay per user," even when it would have been cheaper for them. So I guess it really depends on really understanding the customer and what their drivers are.
Yep. Understand. And we had those conversations. The
Yeah.
CFO said, "Hey, this is not predictable."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, neither's your per word cost of translating,
Yeah.
and this is half a penny on 25 cents, right?"
Yeah.
So that's where we had an advantage of the sheer volume of
Yeah.
words that we translated
Yeah.
made it so minuscule to the overall cost
Yeah.
that it was the same as predicting their per word cost. It was
Yeah.
just like, "Hey, we can't predict this, but we've got to do it." And yeah, most of the companies, we would go in and do a yearly price review, and they realize, hey, we just paid 3x what we used to pay
Yeah.
in technology fees, but it all worked, and we were adding stuff, and it was an unlimited, no more, hey, do you want this module or this add-on? It was all you can eat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
no more figuring that out and having
Yeah.
those negotiations. Just you get every product update, you get
Yeah.
so
Interesting. So
it was a big shift because everything the product team was building
Yeah.
was already baked into the price.
Yeah. Interesting.
But we did
I,
that to stay on
yeah.
the cutting edge of the technology curve so that people
Yeah.
didn't even question it.
Yeah.
Right. And so you create a good model
Yeah.
of your customer completely trusts you. Every product update, everything. We're not trying to sell you anything. Just keep
Yeah.
using us.
Yeah.
We'll keep proving it that we're the best,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
technology. And if we're not, then we can have a conversation. And
Interesting.
it worked really well.
Yeah.
And I know it's not for everybody,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's where if you're willing to make those investments in time and testing it out, the
Yeah.
solution you have will probably not work for everybody, because if
Yeah.
it did, everybody would do it, and
Yeah.
you're not differentiated anymore.
Makes sense. So now I'm curious about the second part of the puzzle, which are the systems, right? So you made the change on the model, and sometimes these changes can take times from a systems perspective. So regarding this or other cases where you spent on systems side, which is the core part of your role, where are the biggest, I guess, areas of leverage that you find creating the path to actually making different creative strategies possible?
Yeah. So when we talk, the creative strategy, and then you move it into like a quote to cash conversation. That is where you earn your operational chops, right? You got to be able to kind of fit the square peg into a round hole. I've implemented probably half a dozen CPQ type of systems within sales organizations, and so I can't really say that there's one like tool that is just like, hey, plug and play, let's go. And so what I look for in a system, one, you have to have a system. I've seen amazing spreadsheets that are used for pricing at billion-dollar companies. If you can figure out operationally how to make something like that work, and it's compliant, and go for it. If it's Salesforce CPQ, old steel brick, or if it's monetize now, or if it's Deal Hub, or that is less of a concern for me. It's not a pitch of like, hey, use this product, it's amazing.
Yeah.
The trick is, again, people over process. If you can find a CPQ system, a quote to cash system that is designed to enable your sellers to present the best experience to their customer, you win.
Interesting.
Instead of designing it from, and every quote to cash system has this. This is why it exists. Compliance.
Yeah.
No contract errors, no pricing errors, calculation errors. That's why you create the system. You move out of Excel, you give less control to the reps. But if you can create the experience of understanding the typical stuff, a quick example on the configuration side and the quoting side, most reps are quoting almost the exact same thing every time. And if they have to click 25 boxes to do it because they have these 25 line items,
it's tiring.
Can we not create a bundle internally that says like, this is the standard, and then I'm going to take out this and this, or like remove the repetitive processes from your system, and sales reps will love you. And as long as that's compliant, leadership will love you. But it all comes down to, how do I deliver the best experience to my customer, not to my executives, right? And that's where, from a revenue operations standpoint, you have to convey that. It can't be because I said so type of a thing, or you'll only get half of the value out of that system or process. And so for me, you start at the back end of the process, kind of start with the end in mind type of a concept of, what do we want this to look like? I need speed. I need, a customer says, hey, we're ready to go. I want to be able to produce a quote in minutes, to make it fast. So, okay, that's a goal. I want the contract, the output document, to be so stinking simple that the CEO can pick it up and know exactly what it is without having to be, someone explaining it to them. Because honestly, right now, the chances of me getting a meeting with my CEO at the end of the quarter to review a buying contract, he's dealing with sales, he's dealing with other stuff, and so I want it to be so stinking simple at the output. Then I kind of back my way into, how do we get it signed real easily? There's got to be a mechanism there of creating the transaction. Then you go to, how do we automate all of the data that's in the contract back into Salesforce? That's kind of where nobody else needs to really be bothered with that. I got to figure it out. My team's got to figure it out. And then you transition to, how do we configure it? How do we configure it on the front end to get all of that the way we want it? And that's how you determine your system.
Makes sense.
When you're determining a quote to cash process, start with that stuff. Don't start with, hey, we've got this pricing model and we need to be able to do these bundles, and because you'll get an implementation guy on the other side that builds all that out and has no regard for how easy it is, all of the other stuff. So if you start with end in mind, you're likely to get the best product up front.
Makes sense.
And go through that. CPQ in my career is the most impactful, but yet most complicated implementation that your sales team will ever be a part of. And so build that in and make sure that you can build out the entire model in a sandbox or something before you buy. Because if you don't, if you take the word of a sales rep, no offense to sales reps, but vision is not always reality. And CPQ is one that I've seen be very messy many times, that quote to cash, because there's so many important pieces in it. And so so from a process standpoint, without getting into the very specifics of, hey, build it this way, do it this way, start with the end in mind. Start with the ideal customer experience, both internally and externally. Back your way into that configuration piece. And if you do that, your system will enable the people, both customer and internal, more than it will be a system. It will just become their world at that point, and sales reps will love it.
Makes sense. Wanted to double click on one point. So when we started the discussion, you mentioned the pricing story. I'm curious if, a lot of what we discussed here is smoothing the process for the seller, making it easy for them to close the conversation. But I'm curious about what do successful sellers do to make this palatable to the prospect on the other end, right? So I'm curious, Do the technologies solve this to make it very slick experience for the prospect? Or have you seen the best sellers do something different? Like, how do they make this a more engaging, value-based thing? Because, the quote is a very dry sort of entity. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, there's not a magic, a silver
Yeah.
bullet.
Yeah.
But I think from a selling standpoint, if you can really get to know what your buyer is looking for in this transaction, then you can understand. I like how you called it the pricing story, right? It's not a delivery. Like, here's the quote.
Yeah.
You just like you pitch your product,
Yeah.
you have to sell them on the price and
Yeah.
more specifically the ROI.
Yeah.
And here's how I see it in I'm going to call this the lazy model
Yeah.
of the sales rep, creates the pricing, or whoever in the sales side creates the price, and they've got a quote.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say they go, that's just it. Yeah. Deliver the quote, very transactional, right?
Yeah.
You're either going to win on price or you're going to lose on price, and nobody cares about anything else in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take it a step further. Hey, we're going to produce an ROI, an ROI calculation document to show you, hey, this is how valuable it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's better. It's giving that. But guess what? You created that ROI, right? Do they believe it?
Yeah.
Who knows? So take it a step further. Discuss the investment and the ROI with the client. Let them build the ROI, right?
Interesting.
Walk them through that process. So rather than telling them, hey, by doing this, you're going to save X amount of time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Walk them through it and say, okay, if we were able to do X for you, how much time would that save?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 40 hours a week for my finance team, or whatever that is. Then don't tell them how much that is worth to them, because then you're telling them that the product's going to work. Let them come to that discovery.
Yeah.
How much is that worth to your finance team? Oh, well, they get paid, $80 an hour. So all of a sudden that's their, but then a step further. So now you've saved that $160,000 a year.
Yeah.
But also, what else can they do with that time that they just saved?
Yeah.
So 40 hours a week, again, for the whole finance team, exponential growth. So now it's not just that, hey, $160 or $160,000 a year times your product, and hey, you get a 1x ROI or whatever that is. You can then say, hey, all of that other stuff they're doing, the time value, and so you're walking them through this discovery process. It's just like in the sales process where you kind of walk them through the pain.
Yep.
I call it drag them through the glass of like, they have to feel the pain of their current situation to do anything. Mm-hmm. You have to show them, and they discover the value of the pricing, and all of a sudden it becomes an investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now if you can approach a pricing story, and with a CFO, a CEO, everything, ideal state, if you can get to agreed upon value, hey, this is going to be $3.4 million in potential gain by doing this.
Yeah.
They're investing $340,000 a year in that. You're investing that money. You don't ever, you put money into an investment. Hey, maybe you're looking for a 10% return or a 13 or a 9%, depending on what you're doing. You don't ever go in and be like, well, the cost is good, but our ROI is what it is. Like, you dig into it and you figure out, hey, is this the best place to put my money? Mm-hmm. You gotta approach it the same way from a seller standpoint of, I have to show them the best value out of this. Yeah. But I can't just tell them. You go put money in the stock market and your advisor says, hey, stock market's booming, we're good. Yeah. Of course he's going to say that. Mm-hmm. He takes a cut of that. So when the pricing story is not your story to tell, it's their story it's a journey for them. And if you can get the relationship, not every buyer will even let you do this, right? Just tell me the price, just tell me the demo, go. Yep. If you can build the relationship early on there, that you can create the pricing journey, you've got the deal. Even if the pricing model doesn't make as much sense, they will respect you so much more because you understand their business. You're willing to go on that journey with them. Yeah. And you're good.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. This was great. These are great examples, Greg. It's really about like even the first example you said was more about understanding the customer first to start with, and then understanding the seller to build these systems, right? As opposed to building something top down that just puts you in a completely different path. So that's I'm nearing the end of the podcast, but is there any other topic on this thing that maybe we missed? I missed any question I missed asking you that you would like to cover?
I just come back to people over process. Nothing new for the majority, but I think we lose sight of that in the boardroom.
Yeah.
There has to be a tactical side of it, but if what we're creating doesn't make our customers' lives better or easier, or it doesn't make our internal, employees' lives easier, then really what are we doing? And so that's where it applies to pricing strategy, but it also really applies to the pricing process and the quote to cash process. And the good news, the topic of your podcast, quote to cash, can have the biggest impact on a revenue team's life, just their quality of life as an employee over any other system. Like I could give someone a legal pad and pen over Salesforce if we have a good quote to cash system, because that's how they get paid, right? That's not only how the company gets paid, but that's how the sales rep gets paid. And so really keep them in mind. And when you have sales team members and sales leaders as your advocates within the organization, there's nowhere that you can't go. And so it's a huge win for you if you can approach it that way.
Makes sense, Greg. This makes all the sense in the world to me. And I've been in the shoes of the pricing person who's tried to come in when the company's pricing strategy failed, and there was a time when the strategy failed, not because it was a bad strategy, it was just because the sales team couldn't use it, and it didn't fit with how they sold. Just didn't fit, right? It was it had to be changed so that what they knew how to do best, it could fit with that, and then they were successful with it. But it's it can very often get missed, especially if there's like a very experienced CRO or a very experienced board member or an investor asking you to go a certain direction, but that's not how your sellers sell. That could be really challenging.
Yeah, and it's not how your buyers buy, right? First place I'd start in a pricing model is I'd interview 20 of my best customers. Tell them, you were designing it, what would it be? Get that data.
Makes sense. Thank you, Greg. So much great feedback from you. A great podcast. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.